Lord Jesus, thank you so much for the chance to be here for a few more minutes. Thank you for the blessings already in this service. We pray that you continue to speak to us. In your name, amen. In the passage that Merle read, a very long passage, I hope you are following along. Did you catch the question about halfway through, the question that Peter asks Jesus? Did you catch that question? The question that he asked Jesus is, hey, if this guy wasn't willing to give up anything and so he's not getting any reward, you know, Jesus, I don't know if you noticed this, but we gave up everything, so what are we getting? Did you hear that question in there? What, Jesus, this guy, obviously, he didn't give up anything, so he gets nothing, but I gave up a whole lot. What do I get? Now this is actually a very natural question, logical question. It's part of, I think, our human DNA, not only our human DNA from sin, but in fact, it goes along with what's been embedded in us from really the time that we are born. It's the carrot and the stick concept. You know the carrot and the stick concept. You're good, you get a carrot. You're bad, you get a stick. The carrot and the stick concept, we have this kind of implanted into us from infancy. We begin to learn this just as little children. Oh, if I do something well, I'm gonna get a smile from my parent, or I'm gonna get some sort of gift. If I do something bad, then I'm gonna get a frown, or I may get some other type of punishment. We have this embedded in us, and it's embedded in our culture. It happens in our schools, and it even happens within the churches, this idea that there are rewards that come with doing well, and there are punishments that come with doing bad. Now, as we mature, it becomes obvious to us that the rule doesn't always apply just so. Sometimes our good deeds are either ignored or maybe they're badly repaid. When this happens in our modern world, we go on Facebook or we go on Twitter or whatever it's called now, the other thing that X, thank you. I could appreciate that. I'm not on any social media, so I don't know these things. Or TikTok, although I hear TikTok's being banned. Is that happening? I don't know or not. But whatever it may be, I know all of you are great TikTok users, so I apologize if it's banned for you all. But whatever it is, we go on those things and we complain about how things aren't fair. You know that great phrase, that's not fair. If you're a parent, you probably heard that before, right? That's not fair. But then if we looked closely at our own lives, we would have to acknowledge something, that we also get things that we don't deserve. We're also recognized sometimes when others should be recognized ahead of us. We also sometimes don't get the consequences of our own action. But somehow in our minds, we have created this to be fair. Because for us, when we don't get what we deserve or when we get what we don't deserve, for us, in our minds, somehow, well, I did something good a while back, so this is just making up the difference. For others, it is unfair. For me, it is fair. Because we are definitely a society that lives by the carrot and the stick principle, and we live by this principle, and it has made us as a society entitled. Now, when we see that this fairness doesn't work quite right in our society, unfortunately, in Christianity, we've come up with this poisonous thinking. We've transposed some of the fairness that should be here, we think should be here on earth, and we've made it go up to heaven. But we've done it in the wrong degree. Yes, there will be justice and fairness in heaven, but we've done it in the wrong way. You see, we now look at God as judge, and we think like, well, you're not getting it here, but you're getting it someday, buddy. We look at God as judge and we see that good behavior is gonna be rewarded in heaven and bad behavior is gonna be punished when Jesus comes back and he'll make it all right. The carrot and the stick principle. It is therefore a very human question, a natural question, logical question that Peter asks, Jesus, what are you gonna give me? I gave up everything, what are you giving me? And even though it's a natural question, it's the wrong question. Because it represents what I believe is one of the most insidious and dangerous sins known to mankind, and that is the sin of entitlement. the sin of entitlement. Do you ever feel entitled? Maybe you don't realize that you feel entitled, but maybe some of these scenarios you recognize. At home, kids, any of you kids ever feel entitled? Have you ever said this to your parents? When I was that age, I never got to stay up that late. Why do my siblings get to stay up that late? There's a level of entitlement there, right? Couples, is there some entitlement sometimes in your marriage? You know, I work all day and I come home and I wish that others would just pull their load at home. Why do I have to do everything? There's this kind of this angst in there. At work, you know, I do more probably than anybody else in here, and yet they're all recognized and I'm not. Do we do it in church? I have been a member longer than anybody else. I have more experience in that role. Why am I not nominated for that position, for that committee spot? Do we do it with our own sin and our own actions? Do we try to justify and rationalize our sin because we are entitled to a few of our sins? I think in some way, almost every person struggles with entitlement somewhere. But here's the challenge. Here's why entitlement is so dangerous. Because it's so hard for us to see in ourselves. It is so hard for us to see in ourselves. Don't believe me? Ask yourself this question. When was the last time that you were at midweek prayer time, our prayer meeting, and you heard someone say, I'd like you to pray for my spirit of entitlement? Have you heard that at prayer meeting recently? By the way, when's the last time you prayed that prayer? Lord, help me not to be so entitled. Me neither. It's not something that we normally see in ourselves. So when Peter asked this question, though it's a natural human question, it is the wrong question because it's an entitled question. Hey, Jesus, we gave up a lot. What do we get? What do I receive? You know, Jesus is so kind. He doesn't say to Peter, you're so entitled. What a dumb question. He doesn't say that. It's kind of Jesus. He says to him, though, he doesn't tell him what he's done wrong, but he does tell him what he should be. Jesus tells Peter and all the disciples that hear this question from Peter after seeing this rich young ruler turn away. He tells them this. He says, here's what I want you to be. Rather than being entitled, here's what I want you to be. I want you to be last. I want you to be last. Now, isn't that imagine trying to sell a leadership book on that. Here's the motivating principle. Here's what we want you to do. We want you to be last. That was a countercultural concept to them at that time. Even after Jesus said it, and even after he tries to explain it, as we'll look at in the parable in just a moment, the disciples still all seem to miss it. Later on in chapter 20 of Matthew, you remember this moment where the mother of the sons of Zebedee comes with James and John to Jesus. This kind of awkward moment where mom's coming on behalf of her sons, and she says to Jesus, she said, let me ask you something. Jesus said, go ahead and ask. And she said, when your kingdom comes, will you let one of my sons sit on your right hand and one of my sons sit on your left hand? And Jesus says to her, you don't understand what you're asking. You're not ready for this. And they go, oh, no, we're ready. And at the end of the story, it's funny because the disciples say, the Bible tells us that the rest of the disciples were indignant that James and John had done this. They were angry that James and John had done this. Now we wish that they were angry because they were frustrated that they still didn't get the theological point of being last. But Ellen White wrote in the book Desire of Ages that the reason why the disciples were angry, she says, they were angry because when the 10 heard of the request of James and John, they were displeased because the highest place in the kingdom was what every one of them was seeking for himself. And they were angry that the two disciples had gained a seeming advantage over them. They wanted to be first, not last. Jesus' call to be last was countercultural then. And to be last is countercultural now. It is so countercultural now. In fact, it's so countercultural that our desire to be first, our entitlement attitudes that are in our hearts are destroying our society and destroying our happiness. I read just yesterday, I just added this to the sermon this morning because I read just yesterday something on CNN that I found so interesting. The happiness report came out this week. If you were here a few months back, we did a sermon series called Hygge, Hygge. I know I'm not saying it like it's spelled, but trust me, it's closer. I'm saying it more closely or more correctly than otherwise. But Hygge, go back and listen to it. But it was about happiness, and it's this word that means togetherness, and it's it's the word that the people in Denmark credit for why they are so happy. Well, the happiness report came out this last week, and there was an article on CNN that I was reading yesterday. The number one country in the world, the most happy country in the world, is Finland. Do we have any Finns here? Not a one. Oh, where? Oh, Lisa, and you're always so happy. This makes perfect sense. This is so wonderful. This is so wonderful. Good Finn. We'll have to compare notes. I have some Finnish blood in me too. I didn't want to use myself because I sometimes, don't smile as much as you do. But Finland is the most happy country in the world, and then followed by Denmark and other, like 4 other Nordic countries. For the first time, what caught my attention though, for the first time since this report has been out, the United States has dropped out of the top 20 in happiness. Dropped out of the top 20 in happiness. And here is the reason why, they said. This is the report from inside this CNN, this secular article. The reason, it says almost whatever institution you're in, the people in North America seem to be fighting over who should be doing what to improve things and who is to blame for things not going well in the past. Hellawell, the article author, says, discussions seem to always be about who can we blame and how can we stake our rights and our privileges for ourselves. And he says it's destroying our happiness. Entitlement is destroying our happiness. It destroys homes. Entitlement destroys homes. Entitlement destroys schools. Entitlement destroys churches. But Jesus said, my way is to be last. Our society says, how do I get first? And it's destroying us. And Jesus comes along and says to all of us, be last. Now, let's define what last is, what last means. Jesus described it like this. He said, whoever wants to be great among you must be a servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. To put that in terms, here's how I would put that. Being last is a life lived and a heart that looks like Jesus, because Jesus is the greatest servant ever. In fact, his service for us is what we're going to be looking at in this week to come. His service for us, his death, his life and his death for us, and for every other person that walks this earth, is the greatest example of service that there is to mankind. And Jesus told us in Matthew that I did not come to be served, but to serve and to give my life as a ransom for many. So in other words, if we want to be last, Jesus calls us to be like him, to be like Jesus, to live like him, to think like him, to act like him. Last is not Jesus telling us, I want you to go and be the biggest loser. That's not what last is. There was an old TV show, you remember that? We're not talking about The Biggest Loser, the TV show, nor is it telling you, hey, if you're last, here's what I want you to do. I want you to lose every single sporting event you play in, and you'll be first in the kingdom of heaven. If that was the case, then the Washington Commanders would celebrate. They would be so joyful. It's not telling us to do worst on the test. If you finish last on your test, you'll be first in the kingdom of heaven in school. My wife, she graduated summa cum laude. That means she graduated first. I graduated. Thank you very much. That means she finished first. I finished way down, further down towards the bottom. So I must be higher in the kingdom of heaven. No, that's not what it's talking about. It's talking about looking and being like Jesus. This is why Peter's question is wrong, is because it's built on entitlement. And entitlement is one of the most dangerous sins because entitlement is always about me. And it's always about being first. And when I'm always about me and I'm always about being first, then I never look and live like Jesus. I never look and live like Jesus. In fact, Peter's question, though it seems innocent enough and it seems natural enough, is more aligned to the rich young ruler than Peter realizes. The rich young ruler walks away from Jesus because the rich young ruler was entitled. Now you may say, where is that in the text? Well, it's in our understanding of human nature. Let's think about it. We don't cling to things that we don't feel entitled to. We don't cling to events or moments that we don't feel entitled to. The rich young ruler has made all this money, and Jesus has now asked him to give that all up, and he feels entitled to keep that. And so he walks away and he misses out on Jesus because his entitlement doesn't allow him to see what Jesus is offering him. We cling to those things that we feel entitled to. And he misses out. And Peter is on the verge of missing out too, because Peter, on the other hand, he also feels entitled because he is under the misconception that his works, that his sacrifice can earn him a place in the kingdom of God. And so he says to Jesus, that guy didn't get in because he didn't do enough, but I've done so much, so what's my reward gonna be? Both of these are entitled positions, whether it's the rich young ruler or it's Peter himself. And so Jesus says, no, it's not about this. It's not about what you earn. It's about being last, being like me, having the heart of Jesus. Entitlement is dangerous because we miss out on the things that Jesus is offering us when we're entitled. It's also dangerous because of the way that we miss out on opportunities to be witnesses for God when we are entitled. This parable that Merle read, there's so many lessons in it, but one of the things that we see is that there were actually people that were upset about God's generosity, about the master's generosity, because they felt like they deserved more. Their entitlement caused them to be angry at someone who received a blessing. I was a pastor in a faraway place a long, long time ago, and there was a gentleman there, an elder, and he was a straight arrow, straight-laced individual. And he was so frustrated. He was so frustrated that we did not make a bigger deal about certain things. And he said sometimes, he would say things like, Pastor, if you don't bring this up to these people, they're gonna be lost. It's gonna be on you. And he would talk to me about this, and he would talk to his son, who was another one of our elders. It was a dad and a son who were both elders at this church. And I remember one time the son said to his dad, Dad, what if we get to heaven and Jesus tells you that this had nothing to do with salvation? And this man, before he knew what was coming out of his mouth, blurted out, he'd be wrong. And then he realized that he had just said Jesus would be wrong, and he was like, and he was trying to figure out a way out of that. He didn't know how to get out of that. But he was so bothered that there were people, he said, when I was growing up, this is how we did it. And now we're just letting people get away with murder. He was so bothered that he didn't get away with stuff, but other people were, that he was willing to say that Jesus was wrong about salvation being only by grace. It causes us to judge others and to treat others poorly. We see that. They began to grumble and they began to be upset at Jesus. They were upset. When we begin when we're entitled, we treat others poorly because we don't appreciate the blessings that they received. When I was 12 years old, some of you have heard the story. When I was 12 years old, I was playing Little League baseball, and my coach came to me after one of our practices, and he said to me, I was in Colton Terrace Little League. I was on the Cubs. I have pictures of me in my nice Cubs uniform. And I was there, and I was standing there after practice, and my coach comes to me and he said, Chad, if you play this Saturday, you will be on the all-star team. The coach wants to put you on the all-star team, but he needs to see that you're committed. Man, in my heart, I so bad wanted to be on that all-star team. But I didn't even bother looking up at my dad because I already knew what the answer was. I kind of did do a side glance, and I just saw my dad standing there going. Now, at 12, I wasn't pleased with my dad for that, but at 46, I'm so grateful that my parents taught me about how blessed it is to have this day of relationship with Jesus without those distractions. You know, parents, your kids are going to be bothered with you about some of the things you teach them sometimes, but hopefully they grow up and they, like I have, and realize, man, what a great thing to have a relationship with Jesus that I have and have this day to set apart with my Lord. But at the time I was bothered. Well, sure enough, I didn't play that Saturday and I didn't get picked on the all-star team. At our next game, after that Saturday's game, I was there and I was sitting on the bench. We were batting and I was sitting on the bench, and the kid on our team that got on the All-Stars, he hit a ball. He hit a double, first to second, and he was trying to stretch it into a triple. And when he was trying to stretch it into the triple, he got thrown out at third base. Now I'm sitting there thinking, this kid's an all-star and it should be mine. I was entitled. I was like, that should be mine. And so when he got thrown out at third base, it was actually quite quiet. And I yell out, way to go, all-star. Again, I didn't look at my dad. You know, we treat people. We ruin our witness when we're entitled. We ruin our witness when we're entitled. We think God's wrong when we're entitled. We hold on to our sin when we're entitled. But the thing that we miss most of all is the thing that actually is the only thing that can make us like Jesus and the only thing that can truly make us last. And that is grace. You see, if we only read the story about the rich young ruler and what Jesus says to Peter, we might still think that we can earn our way in. But when we read it in context, when we read what the rich young ruler says, what happens with the rich young ruler and what happens with Peter, and then we read below it, because the next word right after where Jesus says the first will be last, it says the word for, which means Jesus is addressing what he's just said before. And Jesus then tells us this parable, and it ends with two questions that Jesus asks now that are very important. He said, do I not have the right to do what I want with what is mine? And you know the only one that has grace that can change your life, and the only one that has grace that can save your life, and the only one that has grace that can transform your heart is Jesus Christ. And what he chooses to do with that grace is to pursue you, is to knock on the door of your heart every single day, is to ask you to let him come in so that he can transform your life, so that he can make you last so that you will be like him. That's what he chooses to do with that grace. And Jesus says to them, are you upset about what I do with what's mine, this grace? He says, are you upset because I choose to be generous with my grace? How many Christians, how many people in this world have missed the beauty of grace because they were entitled? Because they were entitled. It is only grace. It is only grace that truly can make us last. Here's the thing. Here's kind of the paradox. You know, we can read that text. The first shall be last and the last shall be first. And there's a danger here of all of us saying, okay, I'm gonna go home and try to be last. I'm gonna be really humble this week and I'm gonna work really hard. But no, the point is you can never get to last. You can never truly be last the way that Jesus calls you to be last unless you have allowed his grace to transform you. It's not by giving up things like the rich young ruler was asked to do. It's not by sacrificing everything like Peter did and the other disciples did. It's not by working in the church. It's not by that you put in all these years sacrificing for the church. None of that will save you. It's only the grace of Jesus Christ. It's only the grace of Jesus Christ. I think of that statement by Mrs. White where she says, education, culture, the exercise of the will, human effort, all have their proper sphere. But she says, but here, and she's talking about the heart, but here they are powerless. There must be a power from within. And then she says that power is Christ, his grace alone. His grace alone. Brothers and sisters, you can't get rid of your entitlement. You can't become last on your own. But what you can do is you can recognize and by faith claim and believe that Jesus is the only way. And then his grace will transform you. His grace will change you. When Christ called to my heart, it was that phrase that Jesus said to me that changed me. You have tried everything else. Why don't you try me? And the moment I said, yes, Jesus, I will try you, that I began to be changed and become a new person. Because grace and grace alone saves. It wasn't Jesus who passed by the rich young ruler. The rich young ruler passed by him because he was entitled. Peter was in danger of being passed by, not because Jesus didn't love him or didn't appreciate what he had done, but because Peter and the disciples were entitled. You and I, we have the potential of being passed by, not because we're not good people or not because we're not good churchgoers, but because we don't realize, and we're still trying to work our way in, and we don't realize that even that is entitlement, and only the grace of Jesus can change us and save us. It is by faith, through grace, that you've been saved, and not by works, so that none of us can boast.
Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, hit the like button here, subscribe to our page for future videos, or for the next video, click the box right here.